Okay, so welcome back. We're going to be looking at the nocturnal planets, the nocturnal sect. That means these planets do well at night. We have Venus, Mars, and Malefic Mercury. We're going to talk about what makes Mercury malefic. There we have the symbols of the planets, kind of the alchemical symbols that we use to represent them in charts. You should be familiar with what they represent. And it's funny that they each look like different things. Mars looks like a spear and a shield, Venus like a mirror, and Mercury like that famous symbol that staff, caduceus, how do you say it? The the staff of knowledge with those intertwining serpents. Well, the planets astronomically look like this versus, in terms of scale. Earth and Venus are similar in size. Mars is smaller than them. Mercury is not much larger than the moon we see there on the end of the far right. Um, Here we can see relative distances of the planets to give us a sense of, you know, why these planets are considered the kind of like the personal planets. We have Mercury, Venus there in between Sun and the Earth, and then the immediate first planet after Earth is Mars. Um, so, um, yeah, this we consider these planets as all being relative to like the personal planets, or they give us personality traits or affect us in these fleeting, innumerable ways, innumerable fashions. These planets shape us because they're actually um, relative to the chart. They're moving around the chart a lot faster, or they're orbiting the sun a lot faster. Therefore, they're going to have enhanced activity. The outer moving planets are considered to be more generational in the sense that they are slower and they affect people in, I guess, a broader, more social sense because they sort of creep through the houses degree by degree. Like Saturn, for example, might spend, 2 years in a sign, 2.5. Mercury is the first one we're going to look at. Um, Mercury, these are some names. First of all, the image is Nagashita, Lord of the Good Tree. And we can see Mercury's inherent association with knowledge and serpent wisdom. Serpents have always been a symbol of wisdom in ancient cultures, and they're nothing to be feared, but instead things to be accessed and used. And they represent technology. And Mercury's different names are like Budhana, which is like intelligence and inherently point to, our cognitive capacities. Mercury is where we get the word merchant. Mercury the merchant. Mercantile, mercado. Hermes is another name. Hermes the messenger. Um, then we have Thoth, Nabo, which is Babylonian, Assyrian versions of the cosmic scribe. Well, first and foremost, to describe Mercury, we have to first point out that he's sort of considered of his nature is considered neutral, meaning he's both good and bad, or rather he's not neutral. He's either good or bad. He rebels and does well in both, right? During night, at this night sect, when he acts more as like an evening entity, an evening of the night, we see Mercury in his more classical representation as psychopomp, or being someone who guides souls through the underworld to be sort of dealt with or maintained by the keeper of the underworld, or the realm of the ancestors that you could call. But in this sense, he's a neutral guide. And I love this image of Mercury here because you can see he's got his winged helmet showing his swift nature. You can see his staff there with the intertwining serpents. Knowledge and skill is at his hands. He's the only entity that can move from the heavens and the realm of the gods down to the realm of the ancestors and to the realm of the mortals, right? So he's got kind of like an unrestricted access in a physical sense. And as such, Mercury is in every part of our lives. And we need him, as you can see here, as people need Mercury desperately. And I think there's maybe if you were to plug into the emotions of Mercury, this is kind of a hard job in the sense that you have to remain so neutral even during all the chaos. More images showing him running around doing errands. We always see there, there's some strong indications that Mercury is, definitely someone associated with the moon, right? Because we keep seeing that shape. Actually, let me go back. In the right picture, you see that like circle with the crescent moon on top of the staff. And throughout history, yeah, there's been the scribe, the writer, the messenger, the one who rules communication and messages, who flies around, represents transportation of ideas and thoughts and commerce, numbers, numerology, science in general, scientific study in general. This was all seen as to be drawing down powers of the moon. So the moon was kind of representative of an Indian thought as well as being the mind and the individual intelligence, and how we use that and wield that is definitely a job of Mercury. When does Mercury go to the underworld? We say that Mercury moves to the underworld during his inferior conjunction. That means when he's retrograde and he's conjoined the sun, meaning in the same exact portion of the sky. At that moment, that's called an inferior conjunction. And that's kind of what you would see here in this layout. And that's going to be when it said Mercury moves to the realm of the ancestors, as we see in that first image. In Hellenistic thought, where Egyptian, Greek, Persian, all these ideas were coming together and stewing together. Here we have that symbol I was talking about. They sort of fused Egyptian and Greek thought to create a third entity to represent Mercury. So we see left there on the bottom image, we have Thoth, and then the right we have Mercury, and in the middle we have Hermes Trismegistus, who's like the founding father or founding entity that represents hermetics or alchemy in general. And Thoth was said to be a scribe of the moon. Like I said earlier, there's that strong lunar indication, and Thoth was represented by the ibis, this crane, as we see on the left. We can see him there even writing and tallying away. The other side of Thoth is the baboon, right? So Mercury also has a trickster or like a nonsensical aspect. It's not all business. There's also a great joy and curiosity and childlike nature of Mercury that we can't overlook. Represented by the baboon, right? Who's up to no good, maybe destroying things even, just to figure out how they work, right? There can be a sort of haphazard aspect of even a naivete or foolishness. But then the other side, the other function of that is Thoth, who's the very wise and precise, bird with the long beak, who has to be very precise when hunting or when gathering things, very still, very intelligent. Well, if you fuse them together, this person became like a god of god status and represented astrology and alchemy. And it's interesting to notice that there's always been these symbols of, the psychopomp, the circle with, like an Anubis, we see there at the bottom of Mercury, there's a symbol there who's associated with, the black-furred wolf. But Mercury has always been associated with intelligence. And in the Indian system, he's Buddha, bringing the internal to the external, the subconscious to the conscious. Using the perception as the senses and the senses as the middle ground, bringing the micro to the macro, the underworld to the realm of the heavens, and the dream to the waking reality. He definitely represents the boat between, the river in this case is the perception, and he's the boat, our faculties. There's pain in this growing, and that's why Malefic Mercury is seen as being malefic in this sense, right? He has a bad side. He, in a lot of senses, he can work for malefic planets, and if he's conjoined other planets, we'll look into that. Mercury his nature being neutral, he sort of shifts and bends to those to influences around him. He's highly impressionable, and as such, there is a sense of construction or deconstruction more than any other planet because Mercury can be shifted. Um, Buddha, definitely was not bad at communication and had thousands of followers, right? And that's the avatar of Vishnu that we, prescribe to Mercury. Buddha meaning, awakening. Another names of him are like Vid, Priyakrit, Sushila, Shamanga, Induputra, Somaja, Vidushita. Child of the moon, right? So again, we have this lunar connection, even Indian thought, because we think Mercury is the child of the moon. And according to the stories, was Tara was this like gleaming star that came from Chandra. Um, Buddha definitely represents in religion the science of spirit, and Venus represents the ecstasy of spirit, but Buddha represents the consciousness that is moving and changing and unfolding. It's the transient development. It's a developed state of divinity. And Buddha is the only avatar of Vishnu who was first born human and became divine through this process of meditation and through these sciences of spirit. And he developed the Dhammapada and the Eightfold Path. And his job in this treatise, this work, was to help people discern asat from sat, truth from non-truth, cognizing things on a material plane. And after you learn to see the truth, you learn to cognize spirit. So again, we move from the material to the spiritual reality. Yet innumerable disciples. And here's the 9 avatars of, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, how many is that? Oh, that's 10, right? The 10 avatars of, the last one is the 10th. The 10 avatars of Vishnu. So here we have Buddha. So here's some attributes really quickly. We're going to go through about Gemini. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. Mercury attributes: ruler of Gemini and Virgo, ruler of North, the North direction. Element is Earth, and as such rules the sense of smell, because when we use aromatherapy and do things like that, we're tonifying and acting on the element of Earth because it's a type of chemical information. The primary power is excretion, and that's the power of Mercury, which is generally has a Vata predominance, but is generally considered tridoshic as having a little bit of each, right? A mixture, a hand in each. Part of self is the consciousness spoken, meaning Mercury represents the part of there's the soul, which is the sun, the individual consciousness, individual, intelligence, which is the moon, and then you have that intelligence spoken. That's the part of self that Mercury rules. And the kingdom, he represents the crown prince. He's always very close to the sun astronomically. So we consider him to work for the sun or work to the king or be an heir to the sun's power. And he's considered the heir with unrestricted access to the king. In terms of peoples, he rules the Asiatic people, those with golden skin like grass, and the Alaskan Eskimos, in regions where people have to be clever enough to live there due to extreme conditions. His function is wealth, and as such, he rules the Vaishya caste of people, which the caste system, that's kind of oppressive, but in a sense, it rules doctors, agriculturists, authors, management, actors, spokespeople, TV hosts, people who have to talk for a living, right? That's going to be your Mercury. People that have to communicate or write or take notes, the scribe that we see in the Egyptian Thoth, right? The Rajas Guna means that's kind of like the primordial nature. And the Rajas is kind of a mode of passion. And Mercury believes he's the doer of his actions. He's external, passionate, overstressed, overwhelmed. His attachment to his actions, and therefore their results, is a result of his Rajas nature. Right? He thinks he's the one that's doing all this work. He thinks he's the one that's learning instead of it being God just learning about himself. Right? This is a very spiritual, subtle thing. The presiding deity is Vishnu, because all that is given is Vishnu, received is Vishnu. The giver is the one that gives is Vishnu, the one that receives is Vishnu. So there's a sense of omnipotence and omnipresence. Mercury is everywhere and important in all things, as I said earlier. And Vishnu is the deity that maintains all manifested reality. So it makes sense we assign Mercury with sort of the maintenance of daily life, day-to-day life. There's no gender to Mercury, a balance of yin and yang, unless afflicted. Then one will have more difficulty expressing the yin or the yang, the masculine or the feminine, the passive or the active parts of our personality, if there is an affliction. But generally, there's a gender non-conforming bent. Dhatu, the tissue represented by Mercury's skin, and generally all cell membranes and the coverings of the body, because there's that boundary. Where there's a boundary, there has to be a sense of communication, right? Where there's a gate, there's a communicative element that opens and closes that gate, that discerns between self or non-self within the body, pathogen or non-pathogen. That's part of the immune function as well, that type of intelligence. So he also rules the proteins of the body, and the places he represents are casinos, anywhere the recreation, and he rules seasons. He rules the seasons because of the earth element ownership, right? Therefore, he rules the differentiation of the things that happen on Earth and the transitions. These are all keywords for Mercury between the seasons. And in the Vedic system, there's 6 seasons, each one about 2 months. And going on, his flavor is umami, meaning all flavors in one, a combination of all flavors. He rules plants without fruit. He rules clothes that are cherished and taken care of, but not necessarily new. His specific season he rules is the time of the harvest, Virgo and Libra, which is like, fall, beginning of autumn. The kingdom he rules is the animals, all animals in the great differentiation of mobile life, right? Things that move. He's an auditory learner, and he tends to, strong Mercury types tend to hear their own thoughts or talk to themselves because they are they hear through sound. His dosha is really balanced, so his moisture and his heat levels are balanced. His nature is mixed, meaning he is completely adaptable. His grains are mung beans, and his stone is emerald. He rules the ages of 3 to 12 when our major motor functioning is learned, and when our lower and elementary or rudimentary education is taking place. So, Jupiter rules higher education and university studies like that, but Mercury rules lower education. He rules the number 4, square, stability, Earth, the attainment and square of 2. So you square 2, and that's 4. So there's a type of the stability of the binary is materialization, is making concrete. What I think becomes concrete by me thinking it. That's the power of Mercury. In the system of the planets, his friends are the Sun and Venus, and that's according to mythology and the stories of the planets, the Graha, the Navagraha. The friends of Mercury are the Sun and Venus. Mercury is neutral to Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, which means, either way, could go either way. Neutral, no opinion. Enemy is Moon. So the Mercury and the Moon are antithesis. You might wonder why, since there's such a strong Mercury-Moon connection, but we won't get into that now. Mercury behaves malefically whenever he's with a malefic planet. That's all you need to know. You can look back at this. But generally, Mercury's aspects or the way he moves through the chart will mirror that. So if he's with Mars, he'll act like Mars. If he's with Saturn, he'll act like Saturn, which are cruel planets, right? If he's with a benefic like Jupiter, he'll do work with Jupiter, and he'll sort of push the agenda of Jupiter. It's a prayer to Mercury. This is from the Gayat al-Hakim, the goal of the wise. Peace be upon you, Mercury the master, the virtuous, the honest, the smart, the articulate, the understanding, the debater, knowledgeable with all arts, the cautious, the writer with good manners. The skillful, the kind, I'm moving along, skipping. The preventer, the proprietor of the revelations to the prophets. The proof of divinity, believing, intellect, conversation, news, surveying, fortune-telling, the fast, Gentile, nice talking. After depressions, working fast. The lying, the humoring, the enduring, the supporting, the obedient, the patient, the merciful, the companionate, the kind, the quiet. The respectful, the preventing of evil, the good. There is not one description that does not fit you, of kindness. You bring more happiness to the happy. You bring boys to boys and girls to girls. You bring light to day and darkness to the night. You blend easily in people's nature and shapes. I call you with all your names. A sun, Arabic Utarid and Persian Tir, Roman Harus and Greek Bormus, and Indian Bada. I ask you to aid us in the study of astrology. So those were like, you want to go back and remember these keywords. These are just a bunch of buzzwords for Mercury. And now we have Venus. Here we have Venus and Mars together in one picture, which first we'll start with kind of like their energetic balancing. Venus has always been in the chart, can soften and tame the energy of Mars. And in this image, we see a sort of distraught Venus propitiating Mars for some reason. But I like the image because we can see the qualities of Venus are bright, fair, emotional, beautiful, and elegant, right? There's a white horse there that we see that is cross-culturally, we can see that with Venus as a sort of steed of light. The other names of Venus are like Ishtara, Ashatara, Inanna. These are kind of Babylonian names, and they represent the feminine goddess of all power, who sort of empowers all life. So strong fertility connections. Phosphoros, the light bringer, which is what that means. You know, Venus is Isis in Syrian thought. Morgenstern, Abendstern, morning and evening star, depending. Zura, Shukra, and others. You should definitely go, there's too many to name here because Venus is such a cross-cultural idea and concept because she's such a luminous planet. It's worth it to explore these names, but the main ones we're going to be focusing are kind of Greco-Roman, Babylonian, Indian. So here we have images of Venus, Aphrodite. There's definite signatures as her being a symbol of love, sex, desire, signifying motherhood, nursing. She makes priesthoods, public benefactors, wearing of golden ornaments, the wearing of crowns, merriment, friendship, and companionship in general. She loves harmony and the acquisition of property. She loves reconciling and diplomacy and marriage and the refined arts, pleasant sounds, music making, sweet singing. All of these amazing things are kind of associated with Venus. In the bottom ones we have Ishtara, and we can see that she is kind of someone who balances energies in the left and right hand. And she was known to bestow power upon the king or the ruling class of Babylon. And the kings there had to visit her once a year in a ceremony, a fertility ceremony, in order to ensure the maintenance of the lineage of power. Aphrodite above her in the image of her, there's a strong association of her coming from the sea, where, was it, Zeus's semen hit the ocean or whatever, and she was born from the churning of the foam of the sea. And we can see her emerging out of the ocean and people trying to cover her up, and the deities are trying to keep her nude. So she's very beautiful and fair, and Aphrodite literally means foam-born. And it's kind of like the wide ruling goddess of the chaos of the sea. Basically, there's another version of her, Oshun, which is the goddess of, that's a really terrible image quality. I apologize about that. But We can see Oshun is the African version of Venus in the sense that she represents fertility, fresh water. She's a protector of feminine beings and feminine people, homosexuals. She's generally considered loving and accepting of all. Of all. Um, she's represented with white horses and white doves and sparrows. And the word aphrodisiac comes from Aphrodite, which is to sort of arouse the senses and arouse the passions of the body, of the physical body, right? She represents the spirituality that can be found through our bodies. And as such, Venus can rule kind of taboo things such as sexuality, right? Because she has both the sinister and righteous applications. Self-control, external control, like those images we see. In Indian thought, the avatar, Mercury was Buddha. This one is Parashurama, which is Rama with an axe. Yeah, basically, it's a story, a very violent story about this avatar that protects the priestly caste or the function and culture of the priesthood with a violent and loyal pride and sense of self-worth. So it's a pretty intense, bloody affair. And there's basically themes later of atonement, forgiveness, and purification. And it's not quite the most Venusian symbol, right? But it shows us the other side of Venus, which is there's a deathly bent of being kind of like a necromancer. And Venus is the only planet in the stories that can raise the dead and is the teacher of the demons. I think it's because Venus can't really tell the difference between angels and demons, and that it's just when you're such an embodiment of love and understanding that when people aren't in your realm of love, the way you do things are going to look strange. So, it's through Venus's compassion that Venus went into Lord Shukra, right? That's the name, Shukra. Lord Shukra Bright, we see there, wanted to help the demons grow spiritually. That's, Venus is also a teacher and a counselor, not just Jupiter. Some other names are Kama, desire, Ushana, with desire, Sita, Acha, clear or unshrouded. Venus is really bright white in the sky and radiant, and she illuminates all the planets she touches. Vijanidhi, the store of seeds, fertility via grains. She rules grains and seeds and semen. Shukra also can represent semen because of the white color. Venus, here we go back. Venus suggests peace and serenity usually, and here we can see that that's not the case. But we can see that protecting, Venus was able to value, Parashurama was able to, experience value or witness value or uphold a sense of value, and violence was not out of the question. But in a debilitated state, too, Venus can represent laziness, extravagance, unruliness, bad company, greed, jealousy, infidelity, promiscuity, or, just an overall abuse of power or a sense of extreme of power. Again, here's another image of all the incarnations of Vishnu. So we've already talked about two of them. So now we're going to move on to the attributes of Venus according to the Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. So again, this is Indian thought. So ruler of Venus rules Venus, and Venus rules Taurus and Libra, rules the southeast direction. Water is the element. The sense is taste, and the power is Venus gives is generation, the power of the sexual organs. The part of the self is the vidya, the virility, the strength of the body. Venus is a counselor, rules brown complexion people of the Polynesian Pacific Islanders, people who have to sail or who are water island. Water island people are Venusian. Rules the Brahmin or priestly caste, or the peoples who have mind and sense control, or they their job revolves around their sense of faith or their ecstasy of spirit. They perform through the ecstasy of spirit in some way. The Rajas is guna, again, we see but this time wrapped up in sensory experience, thinks that they are real, sensory, wants to feel pleasure, and the lusty appraisal of illusion, right? The shiny objects of life get Venus's attention, thereby Venus suffers when Venus loses these objects, or when we lose these objects as a result of Venus's transits. The presiding deity is Lakshmi, which is known to be a goddess of abundance, and Sachi, which is the nourisher of Indra, which is Indra's wife, who is very powerful and empowered him with talismanic energy. And it's almost without the talismans that Sachi provided Indra, Indra would not have power in a lot of senses. So very powerful, amazing women, or goddesses, I should say, beyond my comprehension, really. Dosha is Kapha and Vata. So Venus is a combination of Kapha and Vata, both. The function of Venus is pleasure and rules DNA and genetic material, rules places of beds, rules the taste of sour and blossoming plants. And clothes that are Venusian are new, natural fibered, healthy, fair trade, and non-exploitative. So they're fair clothes, and they're usually new. Rules the time Pisces of Mars, which is early spring, called Vasanta, brilliant. That's the northern hemisphere. They would be reversed for the southern. That would not be spring for the southern hemisphere. But the Kala, the time, the system of time, Venus rules as Paksha, the two halves of the lunar cycle, and rules plants, and those that are easily spreading, sporing, and reproducing, like ferns. Ferns that form, ferns are ancient, and they can travel miles, their spores, to germinate. And where they germinate, all life follows them. So Venus represents these creeping and important generative foundational plants. That's important. Veda is the Yajurveda, which is the book of religious rites and ceremonies, and Venus rules these religious rites and ceremonies. They're kind of like performances or performance art that shows the appreciation and love and devotion to deities. Venus rules musicians, singers, game players, textile manufacturers, designers. Rules hyacinth as a grain, and the gemstone is diamond, and those that emit refracted light. So Venus actually rules all colors in a sense. Actually, no planet really rules color at all. They mainly just rule form, but we associate them with, over time, Venus as kind of like all of them. And like in the African tradition, Aida Wedo is the rainbow serpent, and is known as bringing water down from the heavens to fertilize the earth. So there's a fertile concept in the rainbow. Ages 12 to 32 are Venusian, and they have to do with passionate youth and pubescence. And after the age of Venus is when the body starts to decline. The ages differ. This is the Indian thought, but there's also different ages according to the Greeks. As a learner, Venus is reward-based. Rules in number 6, honeycomb, harmony, efficiency, inner workings, evaluation, and choosing. Venus's friends are Mercury and Saturn. Venus is neutral to Mars and Jupiter, and the enemies of Venus are the luminaries, which is interesting. Here's the prayer to Venus. Peace be upon you, Venus, O happy-hearted being, the cold, the moderate humidity, the clean, the beautiful, the aromatic, the generous in joy, the owner of jewelry, incense, gold, and happiness. I call you with all your names in Arabic, Zara, in Persian, Asahid, in Roman, Aphrodite, in Greek, Tiana, in Indian, Shukra, in the name of all the upper gods. Hence our prayer to become the best astrologers that we can be. Moving on to Mars. Mars is known as Mangala, lucky or auspicious one, because Mars can give protection from accidents, which he also rules. So he rules accidents and then saves you from them. Great. These are some other names of him which you should study. Pyrrhos is a Greek one, which we get pyromaniac, pyro, fire. Arian from Orion, but has to do with Aries, Ars, war. Like the word arsenal. In Babylonian thought, it was Nergal. Basically, it has to do with innate primal forces of vitality, movement, kinesis, force, energy, urgos. There's Mars in the black and white picture in the top right. Then we have the Kartikeya, the god of the second son of Shiva, who is represented by the peacock, which is the furthest evolution of, um, you know, the finest expression of evolutionary of the evolutionary process in a bird. Right? It's simply a magnificent and beautiful creature that shines brilliantly with confidence and preens and is um, lustrous, all these vital things. There's a sense of innocence and purity there too, and that's the higher form of Mars, which we love working with. Um, Mars, when dignified, is defiant, daring. It can't be shaked, unstoppable. But when debilitated, Mars expresses through boasting and immodesty. It can be combative, be bullying, can get involved in confrontations, disrespect, and violence. In extreme cases, it's turbulent, precipitous, careless, even negligent, no time for others, and can be ungrateful, covetous, proud, and greedy. So, Mars is considered a malefic, right? And there's things that Mars rules, such as war, violence, fire, burning, surgery, cutting, slashing, murder, death. There's all these negative things because Mars, this is the malefic planet of the night, right? Venus is the personal planet that is benefic, and the Mars is the nocturnal malefic. Or what I mean by that is that he goes about things in a way that is very intense and not gentle. More images of Mars cross-culturally. We have Nergal top left, Mars in the middle. We can see he's associated with Aries, the ram, and Scorpio down below. So those are the houses the signs that are attributed to Mars. And as such, these are traditional thought, right? Then you have Kuja Mangala, which is in the top right. He's red-skinned, the sword, kind of riding around, looking angry. Right, because the planet Mars in the sky is actually red. So, as such, he'll have names like Rakta, Rudra, Lohitaka, Raktanga. So the red and the red land. Some other names are Kuja, born of the earth, coming from the earth, swift, earth rejoicing, the moving and the changing. So oftentimes we'll see him like on a swift, steed or on a chariot, or moving while heavily armed. So other names are like Ara, swift, Mrityu, killer, Kartikeya, the warrior son of Shiva, like we mentioned earlier, Neta, guiding with his Netra, eyes. That's something we'll get to later, but Mars rules the eyes and vision and fire. You have to digest and interpret the light signal that goes through your eyes, and that's a fiery, digestive, electrical process that Mars rules. And as such, he guides us with our sight, both internal and external, right? So it also represents our spiritual side, and our ability to digest our senses, what happens to us. As such, he rules perception and logic and clarity, intelligence. And the avatar, we've had Buddha, we've had Parasharama, we've had this one, which is Narasimha, which is the man lion. And what happened was basically there was this demon that was going to kill this little boy who was a devotee of Vishnu. Well, anyway, Narasimha was summoned from a split pillar struck by the demon, and this avatar basically killed the demon in a very interesting way because the demon was immortal, and Mars, as Narasimha, had to use his logic to find a loophole in the conditions of the demon's magical protective barrier. So there was actually a way to, like an Achilles heel, you could say, in this sense, and that Narasimha had the perception and the ability to use his intelligence or use his anger and his rage in such a way that was necessary, right? And that's the difference between a good Mars and a bad Mars, is that it takes maturity to know how to use your anger in a constructive way. Um, because, as the story goes, it's, Narasingha was entered into a rage, and the only person that could soothe him was the little boy who he saved, because he had gone too far into the realm of anger. Not too far, because he's divine, but it's a risk we as mortals face. We're not divine, so we should be careful about anger as an emotion, because it can be very, very damaging to the body. Pitta, right? Pitta has a very serious does damage to the body, and that's the dosha of this planet, Mars, who rules fire. He rules the feet and walking. He gives us our strength of character and convictions, and he's the general, the overseer of the army and the kingdom. He rules the native peoples of North and South America, the copper-toned one, and he's a kshatriya, a warrior caste. He's masculine and young and extroverted. His guna, or his quality, is tamas, or illusory, because the effort to overcome illusory frustrations outside the scope of our duty is kind of Mars's his biggest hurdle to overcome. See, he sees the frustrations in his life as real, and his effort to overcome them has to be developed from a place of ignorance or misinformation or stubbornness. The presiding deity, like we already talked about, the clarity through innocence of Kartikeya, Skanda, who's a 7-day-old war general, right? How can you make a child a war general? Well, paradoxically, that's beautiful, because it's like a child is a perfect person to declare war, because a child will have perfect innocent perception and will be able to give perfect response and perfect emotional response. That's kind of the idea. The dosha is pitta and dry, and the function is dharma. So Mars comes here to do something, right? Action-based. Mars is here to work. And so dharma is here to develop the soul and develop the consciousness actively. The tissue that Mars rules is the marrow or the nervous system. Maja means seated within, and that actually is like the electrical impulse that's seated within us, and like the neuron, the synaptic, impulses, and all this electrical energy of our bodies, the way our heart beats, it's all Mars's work. He rules places of fire, furnaces and ovens, places where fuel is burning, and he rules warriors, police people, chemists, surgeons, physicians, slicers, butchers, tyrants, and thieves. His taste is bitter. Mars alerts us. He gives us an alert to potential toxic chemicals in plants, like alkaloids, which are also good stimulants, like in caffeine and things like that. But he gives, Mars rules these bitter things because bitter is often really good at, tonifying the liver. And they're often toxic herbs that you can't take very long. Liver herbs can often do a lot of damage to the organs. As such, ruling bitterness, he rules the bitterness of frustration as an emotion. He rules bitter plants, thin red clothes. He rules summer, the hottest parts of the year. The time associated with him is the day. That's the time that is associated with him, the allotment, the measurement of time. The kingdom was, dhatu, or minerals, or things below the earth that take effort to extract, like precious metals and oil and things like that. Igneous rock, though, is the Indian thought, cooled molten byproducts. He's a visual learner, and he rules the ages of teething, or that terrible twos, when a kid's really angry and develops that self-assertion that's angry, and he starts saying, no to the parent. That's all Mars. O virtuous master, the hot, the hard, the brave, the heart, the blood spiller, the arouser of the intelligent, the one with the powerful name, the victorious, the dominator, the sharp, the rational, responsible for evil and torture, beating and jailing, lying, violating, tale-bearing, obscenity, carelessness, the killer, the stranger, the evil, the revenger of taker from evil. I ask you with your course in the orbit, with your victory. I request from you in the name of you who preferred you and made you revengeful, bolder and greater in value and more dominion. Grant me the clarity of perception to stare into the mysteries of void and understand the phenomena of the night sky. So Mars is, when we use him, or when we invoke him, or when we characterize him, we have to give reverence to the fact that Mars rules, or Mars can bring about accidents, and that's that's kind of one of those things of the divine acting in our lives. Is why do they work in such violent or mysterious ways? But that's been the subject of devotion through all sorts of Buddhist thought and Nepalese thought, Tibetan thought, the wrathful deities, right? Why do we worship them? Well, it seems strange. Why would we invoke something that's evil? It's not evil in the same sense that maybe one might first imagine, and we have to think about that. Mars can also give us protection. It's how we use these energies, how we choose to see these energies in our lives and develop them, right? There's a lower and a higher form. And that's the end of my presentation. You can go to astrovedicus.wordpress.com if you would like to see a blog, or if you would want to have a reading or anything like that. Thanks.